And welcome back to Movie Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see someone else. We're going to introduce her in a second. You're going to see someone else in the picture. So we'll get to the introduction. We have an incredible interview today, and I can't wait to get to it. But how are you doing, Nora?
I'm great, Brian. It's a beautiful day out here in Sacramento. I'm very happy to have Jennifer Gianni joining us today to talk about pregnancy. Woohoo! She's a serious expert in the field, and I'm just so happy to have her. She's also got a wonderful book coming out, which I had the pleasure of reviewing a lot of, and it is unbelievable. Great detail, super relevant to anybody in the movement field. So super happy to have her.
That's fantastic. I can't wait. I've got so much I wanted to ask you about. But before we get to that, please do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button, comment, share, do all of those things on your social media. We really appreciate it. Instagram, we're at Moving Combos. Movingcombos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. I think we got all of that out of the way. We are going to be on the road, Nora and I, in September at Blue Moon Pilates,
which is in Mission Viejo, California, Southern California, September 13th and 14th. We'll be talking about the low back, the shoulder osteoporosis. Come see us live. It'll be a very practical session, a little theory, a lot of practice, and we look forward to seeing you there. All the information on how to register should be in the show notes.
Absolutely. So without further ado, why don't you do the official introduction of our wonderful guest?
All right. We haven't talked about pregnancy at all on this podcast yet. And I've wanted for a long time now to have Jennifer Gianni on. Jennifer Gianni is an amazing educator. She's been working with pregnancy for over 20 years, maybe 25, maybe 30 years now, if I think about how long we've known each other. She's a balanced body educator. She's in Asheville, North Carolina with Fusion Pilates. She also has an amazing educational platform with a ton of fantastic, really high quality workshops on it. And she's just written a book on basically pregnancy for the movement professional, which I'm just thrilled to have her. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book. Like what's your motivation? Why a book? You've done many things in pregnancy. Why this book?
Oh, Nora, it was so outside of my skill set. And first of all, I want to say before we start, I'm obsessed with your podcast. And I really, honestly, I was thinking about this. I think about it as like self-care for the instructor, because you guys, I learn a lot of movement. I learn a lot of anatomy, but the thing that I think is so valuable about your podcast is the back and forth between you and Brian and the pearls of wisdom, even like little simple things that I can imagine a beginning instructor listening to and just getting some clarity, some comfort. So I think what you guys are doing is very different. You also have a common sense approach where there's so much divisiveness, I feel right now, sometimes in our community, and you give such a common sense approach. And I just wanted to let you both know how much I appreciate it. And I think it's so valuable what you guys are doing.
Man, I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Like, okay. That means a lot.
But we need that. And with as many teachers that are coming into our industry right now, I mean, they need sort of that set point, that kind of comfort, and they're getting it from people who are so experienced. And you guys have all these stories, and you really make it relevant. And you make it in a way simple. Like I can remember listening to Brian one day, and he was just saying, and this was very simple and there was more context to it, but he was saying, you never want to make the client wrong, but which, to me, that's building social intelligence, for the future. And I think that's so valuable. And I love that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and honestly, this is why I wanted to invite you on, because your approach, I've had many conversations with Jennifer at conferences and I've been to many workshops of yours and that kind of thing. Like your approach is very much the same. You have a huge amount of technical knowledge about pregnancy and all the many aspects of it. And your goal always with all of our good educators is to basically make that accessible to somebody who doesn't really know anything yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So with that in mind, let's start into that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Like I said, this writing a book was so out of my skill set. Elizabeth Larkham actually recommended me to Handspring.
Yeah.
And, I can remember getting the call or the email from them and being like, there's no way I can do this, because I set like you and Marie Jose and Madeline Black and Elizabeth on this huge pedestal. And, I had many stops and starts in this process, and people like you, Nora, helped give me advice and mentored me through it, which is really so valuable. But the guiding light and the guiding thought that I just kind of kept in the back of my mind as I was writing this, and it took me years. It took me 3 years to write this book. And it's a long book, and it has, hundreds of citations. So, nothing that I was used to. So it makes sense that it would take me this long. But I just thought, okay, I'm a little speck in the world of a lot of people who do this same work. But I've been doing it for a long time. The title of the book, yes. The title of the book is A Movement Educator's Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth. Now, that is such a boring title, but it tells you what it is, right? Because when I was like talking to the publisher, I want to do like making space, and I had all these creative titles, and they were like, no.
just get basic. Tell people what it is.
Tell people what this is. Okay.
I went through the exact same thing, by the way, because my book is called Back Exercise. And I was like, don't you want something clever and creative?
Right.
And they said, no, get to the point. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And, at first I was like, oh, I'm so disappointed. I'm so sad. That's just such a boring title. But then it makes sense when you're trying to get the book to people who don't know me and they're looking it up on Amazon or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So, I'm this little speck in the world doing this work that a bunch of other people do. But I just said, you know what? I've been doing this for a long time. I have a certain lens that I'm translating this work through. And I just need to like write it down and create. I really wanted a comprehensive guide for the movement instructor. So I have all the other information that you would find pretty much anywhere else about the beginning, what happens in the first, second, and third trimester, the contraindications, the safety stuff. But then I also wanted to layer on things that you don't often see with books or manuals with the pre and postnatal client. Like it was really important for me to talk about physiological birth, like what happens to the pelvis as the baby moves through that birth canal, because that gives us so much information during those 9 months of training. Like we can really start to map movement in the brain for that pregnant client. So when they get to labor, and hopefully they're not in their prefrontal cortex, right? They're out of that thinking brain. They're into their lizard brain. That all of that is just there for them, because ideally, we don't want them to be introduced to that right in labor. Like let's like you guys, and so do I, we train athletes, law of specificity.
Right. Exactly. What are we doing
for the task? Let's use those 9 months to train for the task. So, and a lot of other people do this too, but I thought I'm just going to lay out my lens for this. And I wanted the book, honestly, to create more questions, to create more curiosity than just having all the answers for the movement professional.
So one of the things that I loved about reading the book, and also just your work in general, is one of the ways that Brian and I talk about this a lot, and this is certainly my background, is like, what are the principles? Like what is happening? And starting in many ways anatomically, like what is actually happening in the body.
Yeah.
Because, we talk about this a lot on this podcast all the time. If you know what's happening and you kind of understand that, right? And in your case, you're preparing somebody for an experience, if it's their first pregnancy, they've never had.
Yeah.
But you're trying to give them the information and the comfort so they can almost rehearse and practice it. It also helps the movement professional understand, like, what am I trying to do with this pelvis to get it ready?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I love about your approach is it's not like, this is what you do, this is not what you do. This is why you do it.
Right. And using like kind of more uncommon out of the box things that like, Marie Jose is the first one who taught me this about the importance of the talus and the sacrum, right? So I can work on my clients' feet. I can get their footwork and how they're using their feet in all sorts of ways, not only in footwork, but more importantly, how they're walking, which is, we can talk about that a lot. That's so important in my view for me to be working on those walking skills with my pregnant clients. But, so I can be working very far away from the pelvis during those 9 months and know that I'm still affecting the pelvis, right?
Mhm.
And my main goal is, like, I just want to create as much access to movement as possible. Like, that's number one, along with nervous system regulation for my pregnant clients. And those can go hand in hand.
So talk a little bit about, like, what do you mean by, like, the physiology of pregnancy? What are the key elements of that you bring out, that you like teach about and that you're focused on?
Right. Well, one of the main things that I want my pregnant clients to start to visualize. So we visualize it, we go into movements in throughout those 9 months of what the pelvis is going to do during a vaginal birth. And, I'll have a lot of people or some people that I'm working with that say, I'm having a C-section. So I don't need to know that. But honestly, even if you're having a C-section, it's still so important for that health in pregnancy. And you're going to be able, in my mind, to recover better afterwards. But some of the things that I definitely emphasize with my clients, I'm going to bring out the pelvis. So I know not everyone is watching on the video, but I have a pelvis here with the femur heads. And so we talk about, and I have tons of pelvises in my studio. So I always grab one when I'm working with
visual aids are very helpful.
Yes. Yeah. So, if someone at home who's not watching the video, if they put their hands on top of their hip bones, top of their iliac, right? That is the false pelvis, right? So when we talk about the baby dropping into the inlet, we're talking about the true pelvis here, right? So this area here is called the pelvic inlet. And that's when when labor starts at that first stage of labor, the baby is going to drop into that pelvis. And here's my little baby doll that has been traveled with me everywhere across the world.
So Jeff, you're talking here about basically the ring that's formed by kind of the top of the sacrum. It goes below the iliac wings, if you will, and then along kind of the top, the superior pubic ramus, right? So that's the ring you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. This is the false pelvis up here where we put our hands on our hips, but like right around that promontory of the sacrum, kind of top of the pubic bone, that area where in that first stage of labor, the baby's going to first drop into the pelvis. Now, the way that the uterus is shaped, ideally, and I'm going to give you the kind of what is the ideal scenario for the baby going into the pelvis, which, and I always tell my clients, if some people, depending on their anatomy, you could be just fine for the baby to go into the right side instead of the left side. But the baby, it's more ideal for the baby to enter into that left side of the pelvis when it first enters the inlet. And that has a lot to do with the shape of the uterus, right? Because it's I guess it's kind of like a kidney bean shape, but on the left side it's more open. And so it gives the baby more ability to kind of to tuck, right? On the right side of the uterus, it's more compressed. So when the baby drops into the right side, we're going to get more of an extended position, which we want to avoid that, especially when we're starting the labor process. Now we can do a lot while the baby is still around, in pregnancy and at that false pelvis, right? To encourage the tucking and the flexion of the baby to help the baby already in pregnancy line up with the pelvis, right? But in labor, ideally, that left side is usually going to be the best. Now, people have different shapes of uteruses also. So that's a thing. But typically that left side is just going to be more open than the right. And that's one of the reasons that it's more ideal for the baby to drop into that left side. And, we have to remember the baby is only using the space it's given, right? So the space that it's given in the uterus, the space that it's given in the pelvis. So we, there's not much we can do about the anatomy of our uterus, but we can do a lot with how much mobility is there in the uterus? Like, is it always stuck to one side? That's going to really affect the fetal position. That's really going to affect the tone of the pelvic floor, which, so here I have, and you can't see it.
She's busy showing a pelvic floor that's going to now go into the pelvis.
The pelvic floor.
Yeah.
All the muscles.
Yeah, exactly. All the muscles in the pelvic floor. Yep.
Right. And so after the baby drops into the inlet, then we want the baby to traverse down into the mid pelvis. And the mid pelvis is where the pelvic floor is slung, right?
Okay. So from the coccyx around to the pubic bone.
Yeah. And we want to think though, see where these ischial spines are in the back of the pelvis, these little sticky outy bits, the ischial spines. So that's the mid pelvis right around where our pelvic floor is slung. So that when the baby drops into the mid pelvis, its head, hopefully its head, is going to come in contact with the pelvic floor. And now the baby's head, this might seem a little bit strange, some of my images, but what I think of is like the baby's head is like a button and it's trying to go through the buttonhole of the pelvic floor, right? And so there is rotation that has to happen in that mid pelvis. And okay, I forgot to mention about what happens at the inlet. So we want the widest inlet front to back when the baby drops in, right? So what kind of movements do we need to open that inlet? Maybe posterior positioning of the pelvis, maybe external rotation of the femurs.
Let me just hang on a second, because you've just blown my mind. Okay. I have not ever, no, seriously, I just
never heard this before.
My mind being blown. Like this is all new to me.
Oh gosh. I'm so honored.
So now I'm thinking, which is fabulous. I mean, it's fabulous. It's like, okay, that understanding of how the head moves, where the pelvis has to respond to that is just like I literally had never thought about that before. So I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm like,
never.
This is totally fascinating.
That's why when you were explaining that, I was just thinking about, when my children were born and things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you never think about positioning of the baby. All especially from a male perspective, you want to hear head down. That's really what you're thinking about. You just want to hear head down.
One thing.
That's all you're thinking.
Right, not butt down. Yeah.
But you're not thinking about, what side is more comfortable, which, what side will it sort of make an easier childbirth. You don't think about those things
Right.
from a layperson perspective, especially from a movement perspective. So as a movement professional, I've never thought about this when working with clients to see, oh, maybe this might work better than this. So just hearing that was sort of like, oh my gosh, I've never
I
even
love
thought
that.
about that.
And,
But
you know,
so
you
now I'm
say
like,
that.
what does this mean in terms of movement? My brain's just going
Yeah,
like, no.
exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. And, you know,
very
all
cool.
the trends that go through our
Yes,
industry about
yes,
don't
yes,
cue alignment, don't cue
yes.
pelvic floor. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all out of the window, in my opinion, when we talk about this population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, if someone has just their habitual position is just to stand into that right side, they bring that into pregnancy, the uterus, let's say, okay, I'm going to just go to that right side, the baby's staying over there. You know, they get into the waddle walk right away. They're not
Yeah.
alternating their pelvis so that
Right.
they're not getting that concentric, eccentric, side to side of their pelvic floor every time they take a step, right? And then they get to labor and birth, and the baby comes into the mid pelvis, and a lot of times there can be other stuff that's happening, but a lot of times, because of that imbalance in the pelvic floor, we see a delay or a stall in labor, right? So my mind goes
Yeah.
to, I can do so many things during that 9 months to stack the cards in that client's favor, right?
Yeah.
I
To
love
try
it.
to
I love
really
it.
create a better outcome. And so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why, like, walking, you see, that's a typical thing that we talk about all the time with pregnant clients, the waddle walk, where they're shuffling their feet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the lumbar spine is maybe rotating like that washing machine, instead of them getting that side bend of their lumbar spine every time they take a step. And instead of them really taking the foot off and having that mini second of standing on one leg and one foot, which is that concentric contraction of the pelvic floor as we are step by step, right? So there's so many things that we can do in the movement realm.
And what's interesting
Man,
is
this is
I'm
fantastic.
I'm
Yes,
going
go
through
ahead.
some of this and just
Yes.
thinking, okay, I have worked with pregnant women, but normally it's the post, it's the after
Mhm.
that, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, everything that you're now talking about is going to lead to what muscular imbalances we might see after pregnancy with the SI joint, and I'm just going, oh my gosh, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking about that, like then if you have those imbalances and then you go through pregnancy with those imbalances and then you're postnatal, a lot of times those imbalances just get set in,
Mhm.
right? And then
Mhm.
you've got issues like with so many of our pregnant clients that go on kind of forever because they weren't managed through any of the process, and then they're left with stuff they then got to clean up after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, every day I see something from a doctor or a doctor's group that is trying to get more access to women, more information to women. Lately, I printed this out. Okay, so this is called the Cesarean Delivery Rehab Protocol
Uh-huh.
that a doctor named Rebecca Seagraves is trying to get into hospitals. And this is like basic stuff. But
Yeah.
I had 2 C-sections, and um, uh, the things that she's calling for are still happening now, where they were
Mm.
back, 25 years ago when I had my babies. So, she said that it is so slow going, getting this information, this basic information. For example, how are you going to heal your wound? Lying flat, not by sitting up in the hospital bed and putting all that pressure on your incision. And then there's other things like the C-section. They never bind it or compress it when you leave the hospital. And you're not seeing the doctor till 6 weeks after. C-section is the number one surgery in the US, twice as much as hip and knee. You're always going to, first of all, have an OT or a PT in the hospital. C-section, you're not usually.
Right. No.
You're going to go out of there with compression bandaging. C-section, usually you're not. And you're not given basic information. Also, she has, this is really great because she has, and we can put this in the link. Brian, I'll send you this and people can, I think they can find it online. And she has like week to week when you should be desensitizing the scar, you know, when you can start to manipulate it, when you can, you know, how far it's that you can walk, when you can start weight training, swimming. Like we are never given that. But this is the interesting thing, and this is why I bring this up. Slow going, getting it to doctors and nurses. So she now is wanting doulas to bring this information to people and fitness professionals and wellness professionals.
Great.
So more and more, this is becoming like we're becoming more of the first responders to this kind of information.
Which we are in a lot of ways anyway, which we're not designed for, we're often not trained for, but we end up in that role a lot. I talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and what's interesting is in that situation with even C-sections, my wife had 2. And after our first one, she was having a hard time sitting up in bed and even standing up. And I gave her the simple cue that Nora and I give so many times a day: push through your feet rather than trying to lift yourself with your back.
Yeah.
And as soon as she did it, and I said it in front of the nurse, and this is a nurse in this part of the hospital that specializes in childbirth. And the nurse said, I've never heard that before. And my wife just stood right up and said, oh, that was so much easier. And the nurse said, why didn't we hear this? Why don't we know this? I could be telling all of my C-section people this. And I said, well, from now on, you should. And it's something simple. It's simple.
Exactly.
It's so simple. It's so simple. And you know, there, especially with this major surgery, and they're one of the biggest risks of fatalities in both pregnant women and then in post-pregnant women is blood clotting. So not see your patient 6 weeks after. I mean, this happened to Serena Williams, right? After her C-section, but she, you know, she as one of our greatest athletes, you know, in America, she could feel that something not right with my body.
Wrong. Yeah.
But most of our other clients aren't going to really be able to pick that up. And they need to be seeing a doctor before 6 weeks. But this is, you know, this is the state of women's health. And it's been this way for a long time. And I don't know. I don't know if I want to go here, but
we can. The point has been made. It's true. It's where we go.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I want to kind of go back to thinking about like, so now that you understand, or we have a little better understanding of how that pelvis moves. And so you've talked about walking as a way to work with that and getting the normal rhythm of the sacroiliac joint in rotation, the pelvis kind of, and the spine responding. So other ways that you work on that. I mean, walking is clearly one, but are there other, and then that whole idea, like how you get the baby to be on one side or the other, that may be a more complicated conversation, but I'm just thinking of,
well, okay. So the inlet, a lot of these, so I'm breaking these up for educational purposes, but when you're actually in labor, you might be using a combination of things. For example, to get the baby to drop into the inlet, yes, you might be doing hip extension. There's a few things that like doulas and midwives will do. For example, the walker, it's called the walker's technique, where they'll actually have the woman lie on the bed and her legs will be hanging off to get that hip extension, to get that inlet open. But, you know, we can be doing a lot to work with hip extension, external rotation. Hip extension is really the big one to get the inlet open. But also, like the walking is also going to help to sift the baby into that inlet, right?
Kind of wiggle it in,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Kind of allow it to like just like you shuffle something that's kind of big, you
Yeah.
kind of wiggle it in. Okay,
Right, right.
interesting.
Or
Yeah,
you can think of like a lot of well, in the hospitals, they'll have stability balls usually there to just
yeah,
sit on the stability ball and do circles, right? That
right.
can help to really encourage the baby to drop into that inlet. Now,
Huh.
going back to the mid pelvis, so we're asking for rotation, right? The baby is wanting to get through that buttonhole. So
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
best positions for the mid pelvis are asymmetric positions. So again, that could be walking, that could be side lunging, and you want to do it like if you're doing a, a asymmetric lunge, you want to do it on both sides, especially during pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
And that there with breath and with focus right there, that can start to create a little bit more balance and awareness on each side.
So I want to just tune in on that one word, awareness,
Mm,
because, and again, I've worked with you a lot, and Brian and I talk about this too. Like the first step I always say is if you can't feel it, you can't change it.
yes.
So, the first step of any physical process where you're trying to actually give somebody tools to be able to
Mhm.
take care of themselves is awareness. Like, what is my pelvis doing? Do I move to the same to the right? Do I move to the same to the left? What's happening? Do I feel tighter over here? Like all those pieces. So, absolutely, awareness is always step one on that. And I know with pregnancy, that awareness changes on a weekly basis.
It does. It does.
Everyone I know is like, I feel totally different today than I did 3 days
Yeah.
ago. And yeah.
Yeah. You guys are going to really know how much of a fan I am of yours. But Nora, when you were talking about hypermobility in one of the podcasts, and you were giving your educated guess about proprioception and hypermobility, well, that's also with pregnancy. Like things
Yeah,
are
you're right.
changing so much that the check-in and what the awareness and the curiosity about our bodies, because things are just changing at huge speeds day by day
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
pregnant
Yeah.
body. Yeah. And so there's lots of things that we can be doing in the Pilates studio to encourage like mapping that inlet opening, mapping that mid pelvis opening, and things like the mid pelvic opening is so functional, right? So in pregnancy, all of this is going to keep their femurs feeling good, their lower back feeling good, their pelvis. So all of this is very nice inside pregnancy. And then they're just learning and thinking and connecting all of this to what's going to be happening in labor.
Great. I
Interesting.
love
All
it.
right. So now the baby has entered the mid pelvis and it has to rotate in the mid pelvis, right? Then it enters the outlet. And so the baby extends. Once the head comes out, the baby has to rotate again to get one shoulder out and then the other shoulder out to come out. Yeah. So the thing about and I've seen this in classes a lot, Nora, talking about the awareness. So when we start to do exercises and positionings that are encouraging the opening of the outlet, the light bulbs start going off. So the outlet, we're talking about getting length between the pubic bone and the tailbone, so front
Mhm.
to back. And
Right.
we're also talking about side to side between the ischial tuberosities, between the sit bones,
Yeah.
right? So what movements are going to encourage that? Well, deep hip flexion,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So when
Yep.
you're in a deep resting squat, you're going to have that space between the front and the back, right? Even though when you're in a deep squat, so people really have to think about this. When you're in a deep squat, the inlet is wide, but you have that front to back opening between the pubic bone and the tailbone. A lot of that reason is your paraspinals, when you're in that deep squat, are being stretched, right? And that's going to going to nutate your tail out. So that's primary, the deep hip flexion. So we want, and a lot of people in our culture, you know, we go overseas to Asia, and you know, the deep squatting, if you want to use the bathroom,
this is a normal way to live life. You do this, you do this functionally in everyday life.
Exactly.
Regularly.
Right. So in the US, it's a whole different story. Like people, you know, we've heard it before. We're sitting in regular chairs, sitting on the high toilets. And so they're, never mind their hips, their knees and ankles. So we have to, and I have a lot of creative things in the book that help people kind of step into finding more of that optimal deep squat, you know, if they're able to. So, so the first thing is that deep hip flexion. Second thing, if we want to get those sitting bones to open, what do we need? Internal rotation, right? Yeah. So if you combine, let's say like, you know, like a puppy dog pose where you're on your elbows and your knees on the floor, like in all fours, but you're on the elbows and the knees, and you kind of internally rotate your legs, and then you push back so your hips are past your knees. Then you have that deep hip flexion. So you have the space between your pubic bone and your tail, and you're working that internal rotation. So you also have the sitting bones open.
And that's something we can always get for homework, even for a client too. I mean, that's something that's easy for them to practice.
Yeah. And I've actually been playing with, you know, kneeling abdominals facing back on the reformer. I've been playing with that with the legs in external and internal rotation to activate different parts of that. And now, like, you could do that same idea, but with resistance in internal rotation. So the feet are kind of at the edge of the carriage and knees are closer to the shoulder rests.
Yes.
And you're just doing hip flexion from there.
Right. And then having, you know, a lot of times I'll have, like, if we're on the mat and I'll put them in that position, I might put a towel or a yoga block under their head to support their head. And then I'll just have them, this is the awareness piece, because a lot of people, that is a very unfamiliar opening in their pelvis. So
absolutely. Most people like to keep that thing closed, right? That's just sort of a natural reaction for a lot of people. Yeah,
especially in pregnancy, if they've been walking around in external rotation, doing the waddle walk, they're going to have an open inlet, but their outlet is going to be a little bit closed and rigid. So if they're not working that pulsation of their pelvis, and we put them in that puppy dog and we have them focus and try to breathe down into that area, at first it's going to feel like, I can't do this. This feels really rigid. But, you know, letting the client know that the more that they practice in a gentle way, that's gonna be there for them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And I think that's super.
That's great. That was great.
But important, very important, because in fitness and in general, we have a tendency to focus on the contraction. We have to focus, you know, on the muscle shortening
all the time.
Whereas this is much more of mobility of the pelvic floor, which we never talk about. You may talk about hamstring mobility or your low back or something, but we're really talking about the pelvic floor. We're talking about the muscles that line that, and we're really trying to get those to separate, open up in a way that's not normal in everyday activity, not normal in the fitness world, not necessarily normal in Pilates world, that we don't take clients into that, but to focus on the relaxation aspect.
Yes. And I have a whole few pages on toilet posture in my book, because it's so important. And like I know not everybody can see this, but I have a cervix wheel here.
Wow. That's 10 centimeters.
And so 10 centimeters, this is how big our cervix and the vagina will open. Talk about freaking biotensegrity, right? I mean,
that's right. Exactly. It's got to go from here to there.
And then right after they have the baby, usually they can stand up and pick up the baby. I mean, our body is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot. So we need to prepare the body for that, for what's coming up.
So guys, just to exaggerate that, so Jennifer just picked up was basically just a wooden disc that had all kinds of circles on it. And the circles went from 1 centimeter, which would be 1 centimeter dilation, all the way up to a 10 centimeter dilation. So a circle that's 10 centimeters across. And that's how much basically the cervix, the vagina has to open to let the baby's head out. And it's like, and then, to your point, like it has to do that and then it has to go back.
Yeah.
Right. It's got like, and we expand and we contract. That's a lot of dynamic movement.
Yeah.
And I'm going to recommend for people who don't normally watch us on YouTube, pull this up, and I marked down at the 39-minute mark when she pulls out the cervix wheel, because it blew my, I'm going to say it blew my mind. I just went, oh my gosh, I had no idea. You hear 10 centimeters.
I've heard it for so long, but I hadn't seen it. The visual made a big difference in my brain.
It made a gigantic difference in my brain. I just thought, heaven, I never thought about that. But so I'm going to highly recommend, if you're not seeing this on YouTube, go to the 39-minute mark, get the visual, because it's going to change the way you think about what needs to happen to the female anatomy at that moment. Yeah.
Females are amazing. Our bodies.
A lot more respect coming from me now. Oh my gosh.
And now the other thing that's kind of not as well known for the outlet. So we have the deep hip flexion, we have the internal rotation. Oh, actually what I want to talk about with the internal rotation, there's a difference between just adduction and the knees coming together and internal rotation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On a lot of social media now, because internal rotation is definitely we need it, to open the outlet. But it's like trending a lot. So people have come up with this thing called closed knee pushing. But I think that we need to think about that a little bit more, because the internal rotation, opening the sits bones, is different from just that pure adduction. And when we get too much tone in the adductors, what happens? We're affecting the pelvic floor maybe too much, possibly. And the adductors, it connects, that tissue has connections all the way back into the tailbone. So if we are restricting the pelvic floor and then we're restricting the tailbone, then it's going to be even harder during expulsion for that tail to open to the back, right? So we need to be really measured. I think some people, it's just like dosage, right? A little of something good, and then we do a whole lot of it, and it becomes not so good.
Well, Pilates teachers love to do that. We take a tiny thing and then we build it up into like a principle that we do way too much of.
Right. Right. Yes. Exactly. And in birth, honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, we need to get out of that thinking brain, and we need to get out of that type A, like, oh, I have to get the widest pelvis I can possibly get. No, we need the most relaxed pelvis, right? That's really number one. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, okay. So the next thing for opening the outlet that we need is activation of our latissimus. So you will see, if you can look this up, like just Google like Cleopatra's birth, and you'll see a drawing of her attendant holding her arm up. Or look at Pioneer birth, and you'll see her attendant. She's
holding on to something. Yeah.
And her attendants are pulling her arms forward and pushing her knees back. There's a bunch of different drawings from like the early 1900s or the late 1800s with indigenous women like hanging from tree branches, et cetera, et cetera. So, from our arm down through our latissimus into our thoracolumbar tissue, into our sacrum and tail. So when we reach up and then we pull down, that's going to help to open our tail and our sacrum to get even more opening in our pelvic outlet.
I would never, I mean, I like, again, looking myofascially, I can now see that, but that would not ever have occurred to me, that connection all the way through to the tail.
Right. It's like we forgot all this. So it's so cool, like, to look at what people centuries and centuries ago, they just knew it. They didn't have the scientific terms, of course, but they knew like, this is how you give birth.
This worked. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this has worked for a long time at that point. It's like, oh, my mother taught me, her grandmother taught her grandmother taught her, and there we go.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And and then we think about, okay, so we understand intellectually, like, how to open all these areas, and we can use, like, for example, when we're maybe wanting to use the inlet, we go back and forth. So it's that kind of sifting kind of conversation. We're trying to move the baby through the space that we have, move the button through that buttonhole. And we can definitely practice different positions and exercises that are going to give us access to these. But then we also have to go above and below the pelvis to create even more access. For example, the rib cage. The rib cage is big in pregnancy because, we tend to, as we're have more weight in our breast, more weight in the belly, the baby's getting bigger. We tend to, most people have that kind of sway back pregnant posture, right? Where they're kind of closing off their back body. And so they're closing off the back of their diaphragm. So everything's kind of being pushed forward. And the rib cage, excuse me, gets really, really rigid. So I also am done with making things complicated. And so what I like to say is, look at your client from a distance, like go 20 feet back. That's where you're going to really see things. Don't be right on top of them. You're not going to see anything. Move back. What's too extended? What's too compressed? And then let's position them, for example, with breath to expand what's compressed and maybe compress what's extended, just to try to get the breath to move into a few more places in the hopes of really getting that rib cage to start to mobilize. Because just like, we've heard this a million times, but if you have a balloon and you squeeze it at the top, right, then there's going to be all that pressure down below. So that's what the uterus and the baby and the pelvic floor is feeling when we're locked up in our upper body and our rib cage.
I also know some women that I know that have been pregnant have had real issues with their rib cage because the rib cage is so tight, especially at the bottom, and then the baby starts to hit it. Like this friend who kept getting bruises on the inside of her rib cage from babies kicking her from the inside,
right?
And a lot of that is that tension. And I'm thinking of this client particularly. Boy, was she tight in that rib cage.
Yes.
So that makes sense too, because the other thing too is you kind of need to have some give, especially in that lower part of that rib cage, just to accommodate all the changes in shape that the body's going through. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people, because of their core activation during pregnancy, it'll look like they have, I wish I had a rib cage, but it'll look like they have a wide infrasternal angle, and they might at those bottom ribs. But if you look above, like around the xiphoid process, they're really clamped down, right?
Right up at the top. Like it's really tight at the top and then it widens out. But it's that tightness that's right up at the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, in the book, I work a lot, or I have a number of different sequences about how to try to get some movement in the collarbones, the manubrium, the first and second rib. I teach in the book about, which there's tons of information about now, but not on pregnancy, about proper oral posture and really having the client think about nothing crazy, no breath holds, nothing like that, but just daily paced breath moment to moment and good oral posture, and letting them know, like, just practice it, because most of us are not used to taking through our nostrils like just a normal inhale and exhale. We're usually, shorter with the inhales and exhales. We're breathing through our mouths. And then I also tell them, like, yeah, let's practice this, because this is going to strengthen your respiratory system and bring up the parasympathetic tone. But there also are times where you're going to have to breathe out of your mouth, like labor. But that shouldn't be in daily breathing, right? Because your moment to moment breath, when you don't need to be breathing out of your mouth, is what's going to strengthen your respiratory system and move those upper ribs.
And what sounds what I find sort of interesting right now is just where my mind is going with working with these clients is, for so long we were taught, with relax and being released, we don't want to focus on mobility. We don't want to focus on flexibility. You want to focus on stabilizing stability, which for a lot of people, their brain is going to say, tighten, get everything tight. But everything that I'm hearing you say, we need that freedom of movement. We need the ribs to move. We need the pelvis to move, within a controlled amount of space.
Yeah.
And not so much clamping down, which is what you hear sometimes when you hear, people talk about working with pregnant clients, is focus on stabilizing, focus on stabilizing.
I know it's a complicated conversation, because there are a lot of elements, but when you're preparing a woman for labor, and this is, we see this in the hypermobile body too. They may be hypermobile, but there are spots in that body
that are tight as can be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is what we're thinking about in our pregnant clients too. And when we're thinking about opening the pelvis, we have to look at those structures, like primarily the psoas. So the psoas, it kind of lives behind and to the sides of the uterus. And it is like a hammock for the uterus. It's really, sometimes I call it the slip and slide of the uterus. And if the baby, like we were talking about before, if it's preferencing one side and staying over there, we might have to do some things to help to get some length and, for lack of a better word, some hydration in that psoas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important for me that we not just clamp down, what you were talking about, Brian, right? But we want to do things that are really going to help to, again, for lack of a better word, because I know we have a lot of word police these days, but for lack of a better word, like lengthening, finding that kind of proper tone, and all these muscles that are going to affect the opening of the pelvis, right? So we think about glutes, we think about the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the psoas. The psoas is a big one in pregnancy. And and we have to teach proper sitting. One of the simplest things to do is to teach proper sitting for our clients.
One of the things that I love about your approach, and I want to really underline this a bit, is that you're not talking about doing extreme things. You're talking about managing the normal, ideally normal pelvic rhythm of walking, right? The normal movement of the ribs in breathing, the proper way to kind of sit and support the body. Like these are, again, I want to underline that, because this isn't like I'm going to do all these crazy things that are going to over mobilize or over move something. It's just finding what should be kind of the normal rhythms and the normal ways that the body contracts and releases in ordinary motion, because that's what's actually going to make the change.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and sometimes you've got to really you've got to push things to get to that normal range of motion, right? You've got to do something extreme to get there. But that's the idea. You're not focusing on do anything crazy. You're just focusing on let's regain the normal ways that the body can move.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important in the 9 months that we kind of experiment with that. Of course, we're going to have strengthening, right? But also think about what I just showed with the 10 centimeters. I mean, the
Mhm.
woman's body, for her, especially if she's having, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but if she's having an unmedicated birth where she's moving around and she's getting into so many positions, I mean, we have to have some access in that body, right? So these things that you were just pointing out, Nora, these are our set points, right? So that we can go beyond that. But if you don't have that set point, right, and then you're trying to skip over that and do some crazy kind of yoga pose, or for the first time in labor, you're going into a deep squat. I don't know. I mean, that doesn't seem like a great idea. So why don't we prepare through those 9 months? Yeah.
I think that
Yeah,
that's the
love it.
thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is uh, this should be a 9-month process. And I think for so many people, they don't really start talking about being pregnant or whatnot until their body starts physiologically changing, where they can feel that they're changing.
Yeah.
But realistically, you can start at the beginning. You can start at month 1
Yeah,
and really get
absolutely.
their body prepared by
Yes.
month 9 so that they're training for a marathon, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah,
We would train for 9 months. Why
Right.
not
yeah,
do it for this?
Exactly. Yeah, because in first trimester, sometimes women won't tell you they're pregnant because
Mhm.
yes, the
miscarriages
whole
happen.
12-week thing. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Um, and so sometimes you don't know. But if you know that they're pregnant, yes, I'm of the same mind. Let's start training them in that first trimester. Get their brain mapped with all these movements. And in all the literature or other manuals and books, you'll find, yes, and it's not contraindicated. So yes, you could do ab curls, you could lie on your tummy, you could do all the stuff that you had been doing before in first trimester, yes. And that's fine, but I want to start to add in more ideas, more paying attention, because this is the time before they've grown too much in the first trimester that we can really clean house, right? We can
Yeah.
really create a lot of awareness that they can like carry through to the end
Mhm.
of pregnancy.
Because they have access to how their body doesn't feel so unusual yet.
Yes,
Right. So
exactly.
that's really they have access to like, what does it feel like to walk? What does it feel like? They have access to the
Right.
usual feeling of those things, and that's when you can work with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, and they
Once
have
they're further along,
right.
things are a lot more erratic. Yeah.
And they have
But
incentive. Yeah.
you're also focusing on the awareness at a earlier stage rather than when they already have the water walk, to say, "Oh, you really shouldn't be doing that," because now they've already established a pattern that their body is stuck in.
Mhm.
You can really get them aware at an earlier state so that they're like, "Oh yeah, I noticed myself doing this." So before they get there, they're really focusing on that. So I think establishing that awareness at an earlier time is vital for something like
It's
that.
it's great if you can do it. Yeah. I mean, you can do stuff later on too. So I don't want to discourage the movement
Mm,
professional that only finds out, the beginning of second trimester. You
Yeah.
can still do a lot, but if like you have a client saying we're trying to get pregnant, I mean, start then,
yeah.
right? And they have incentive, because most people know, or the movement instructor could get out the cervical wheel and say, this is, yeah.
And for
Here's what we have
you.
to prepare for.
So
That alone be like, okay.
they have incentive. I can remember a client in Los Angeles at the end of her pregnancy before she left me, and she had been doing Pilates with me actually for a few years before she got pregnant. She was an older mom, and she was really worried about it, and I was just so detailed with her. We worked so hard, and at the end she was like, I have never known so much about my body. I feel like I
Mhm.
understand Pilates now. I understand movement from all this detail, because she was really training for her task, and she
Yeah.
was really intent on just knowing her body. So she could get those internal cues when she hit labor, right? And those internal cues, it doesn't matter if you're having a vaginal birth or if you're having a C-section, and this is what I want to get across to movement professionals. What we do is so valuable. And when you decide, like, I'm going to start to serve the pre and postnatal client, from that moment, you're being invited to build families for communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that we have to remember, the prenatal yoga, Pilates movement instructor, that the things that we say and do are so influential.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, we may be reading and observing the client's nervous system, right? When they come in, that background, but we also have to pay attention to ourselves too, if we're going to serve this population, right? We have to ask ourselves the question of, why do we want to serve this population? And make sure we don't have any agendas, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we just want to hold space, and that we want them to find their best selves and their best birth, and that we can be on the positive side of building a family and helping a child and helping a woman, right? But we can be such an important part of that birth team, which to me, that keeps me going.
Mhm.
I'm still teaching clients. I don't want to stop, even though my husband is like, aren't we going to retire soon?
You're like, nah, maybe you are.
Exactly. But it's so exciting to me to know that I can open up these spaces for my clients, and I can make them really see the power of their female body. And then that creates more confidence. That creates a space where they find their voice. And so for a woman in pregnancy, labor, delivery, after taking care of a child, owning your voice and saying what you need, and, making observations about your body, and, asking for what you need and want is so important. And I feel like we might be a small piece of the puzzle, but we are part of that birth team, and we are so important in developing this.
Man, that was a great that was a great place to end on there, Jennifer. Yeah, and I mean, the other thing too is we see people 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, I always say this. It's like, in terms of a medical team, the surgeon's going to see you twice. Their PA is going to see you 3 times. The PT is going to see you 5 times, maybe. And and you're going to see them 2 or 3 times a week. So you literally are that support in that daily or weekly or biweekly scenario.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was
I did. Before
fantastic.
we go,
Brian, yes.
do me a favor. It sounds like the book is filled with a lot of practical advice for the movement professional. I think it would also be great for someone who is, pregnant, who would like to know more about their body as well, just because it'll be interesting for that person who may not be able to even afford a personal trainer or a Pilates instructor. Maybe they'll understand a little bit more and say, I can do some self-care. When is the book going to be released? So if you'll give us some of your information.
Yeah, it releases August 21st, and you can pre-order it or order it then on Singing Dragons is the publisher, but also Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And my husband and we're going on, I'm teaching in Los Angeles. So we're taking our RV from Asheville to Los Angeles, and we're stopping at different studios, and I'm doing a lecture, just an hour lecture in places like Nashville and Memphis and Oklahoma City and Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, because we're also going to do stops when we come back. So, and I'll send you information about all that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Awesome.
If you could do that, we could put that in the show notes, and also in our Instagram feed, so that people can see if it's coming to the area that they live in. Maybe they can come and actually interact with you personally and get a little bit more information live and in person. I I'm sure Nora's going to ask you this, but I want to do it even before she gets to it. We've only covered up to birth. I would love to bring you back, and not in a year from now, but sooner rather than later, to talk about post-birth, because I think a lot of people,
absolutely.
That's when I have more practical, knowledge with people, is afterward. So I think that would be a great way to sort of make this a two-parter, and maybe bring you on in the not so distant future and help you promote your book a little bit more. But for us, give us more information of how to work with our clients even better.
Yes, I would love that.
Fantastic.
I would love it. Yes.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much for all of your information.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm blown away. Normally, Nora and I are just chattering away, and I think we were listening a heck of a lot more than we were talking, because this is all important information.
It was just delicious. It was like I got a really good meal today. I'm so excited. My brain is so very happy.
Thank you.
So tell us the name of the book again.
A Movement Educator's Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth.
And do you have a website by any chance, or anything where that they can contact you directly?
They can contact us at fusionpilates.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jen, for joining us. Wow. We're so lucky to have you, and can't wait for part 2. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Do us a favor, guys. As always, hit that like and subscribe, share. This is going to be one that I want you to share with your clients, with
everybody
your friends. This is an important one. This is a really important one. And I think it's something we don't talk about nearly enough in the fitness realm, whether it be Pilates or in personal training. So I really think, please share this one. We'd really appreciate it. Moving Combos on Instagram, as well as movingcombos@gmail.com, the best way to get in touch with us. And for Jennifer Gianni, for North St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.